All right, guys, what is up? Welcome in. It is GC Live, Monday episode of the show. Monday morning, as always, trying to get a head start on talking about South Carolina's latest football game. I mean, I don't know, Chris. We've reached the territory where I think Gamecock fans rightfully upset. Feels kind of like it did at maybe the midway to 2/3 point of the season in 2023. Lots of frustrated Gamecock fans. It kind of came to a head, I feel like, on Saturday afternoon. South Carolina's 26-7 loss to Oklahoma there at Williams-Brice Stadium. We're going to break it all down today, but first, going to tell you about a couple of our great sponsors here on GC Live and on Gamecock Central. Our guy, Clint Hammond, our presenting sponsor from CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Seems like the mortgage interest rates may be slowly starting to creep down. So if you've been maybe holding off, thinking about buying a home, thinking about kind of making that move to home ownership, you've been hesitating, just hit up Clint. He'll walk you through the entire process and let you know what you can afford, what your monthly payment's going to look like, what the down payment's going to look like, and then all the other little things that maybe you're not even thinking about as well. Plus, he will commiserate with you on the Gamecocks offense at this point as well. 803-422-6797. Chris, I got a text from Clint on Saturday.
Oh, yeah.
Not about mortgages, about play calling. So Clint is one of all of us.
He is. Let's also tell you about our friends over at Ferry Chevrolet. That's ferrychevrolet.com, F-A-I-R-E-Y. If you're not on the live stream and need to know how to spell it, that's important, Wes. ferrychevrolet.com, or you can give them a call, 803-937-4531. You've heard about them here on the show. If you're on GamecockCentral.com, like you should be, especially at a time like this, you've seen them on the site, the weekly drive that's presented by Ferry Chevrolet and other places on the website. They've been in business for about 100 years, since 1926, started right here in the Palmetto State in St. Matthews, now conveniently located in Orangeburg off of I-26, right in between Columbia and Charleston. So if you're in the area, well worth making the drive. But the good news is, if you don't have time, if you want to go later, that's fine. You can go to ferrychevrolet.com, check out their new and used inventory. Honesty, integrity, a handshake. That's how they operate over at Ferry Chevrolet. Family-owned business led by a fourth-generation dealer in Joseph Ferry. So just like with Clint, if you're thinking about a mortgage, if you're thinking about a new or used vehicle, if you have questions about any of it, if you want to check it out, ferrychevrolet.com or give their team a call, 803-937-4531.
All right, man, let's pull the Band-Aid off. Let's talk about it. I would say forgettable afternoon at Williams-Brice Stadium, but unfortunately, I think you've kind of reached that point for South Carolina. There's always a breaking point in any season where, either fans are like, hey, this season could be special, or, man, this thing may not get turned around. And I think even if you were pretty positive about kind of thinking where things could eventually be headed, even with the slow start, I feel like just a lot of the people I talk to, a lot of fans, a lot of people I follow on social media have reached an all-time maybe frustration just in terms of this season. And, you saw that outpouring on Saturday kind of after the game. It was a beautiful, T says apathy. I don't know. I don't think we're at the apathy point yet. I think we are at the fired up point for a lot of people. Apathy is maybe next, but a lot of people just very fired up on just what they saw Saturday, man. And it was kind of it was a beautiful day at Willie B. It kind of just had hey, this is SEC Southern football at its finest. Not a cloud in the sky. You got, a full house. You got two teams that kind of are in a similar spot, even if their records were not the same. There was some pressure on really both of these teams to go out there and find a win. And, man, unfortunately for South Carolina, it just did not happen. Like, if you want to look at the way you wanted a game to play out, the way it needed to play out, I've been with this team. I've been going back to that well of third downs, turnovers, and red zone. And you really look at all three of those categories, and Oklahoma, for the most part, dominated all three. And, we'll dive into some of those things individually, but the main reason I was saying turnovers going into this game is that Oklahoma has been a team that has turned the football over quite a bit. And South Carolina's been a team that has, protected the ball, but even more importantly, created some, takeaways on defense. And we just did not see that on either side. I'm sure we'll get into red zone and decision making and game flow and stuff like that. And then 0 for 10 on your first 10 third downs of the game, which they were able to stay on the field a little bit because they converted some fourth downs after those third downs. But obviously, if you're at an 0 for 10 clip on third downs, that's just not going to get it done.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. Most of the conversation, Wes, has centered around the offense, and rightfully so, and we'll dive more into that. But really, when you look at it, man, I don't think South Carolina won any of the three phases of this game. There were special teams wise, you got a couple of nice returns from Bakari Swain, but you had the failed fake punt. Oklahoma drilled a 54-yard field goal. You weren't able to create any semblance of complementary football because when you had some opportunities, you weren't able to cash in on them, with one exception on a fourth down where you could argue that South Carolina was pretty fortunate in a lot of ways to score their lone touchdown of the game. I think you look at the turnover situation. That's one where you needed to be in the positive there and you weren't. I think about a play defensively where you got a third down stop after Oklahoma put together a little bit of a drive, and Jalen Kilgore in zone coverage made a great play, but was just a little bit off on securing an interception. Oklahoma's up 14-7. Instead of maybe getting a pick there, you just get the offense off the field. Oklahoma, like I said, nails a 54-yard field goal. Now it's 17-7, and you're sitting there going, okay, the offense hasn't been able to do enough. So, again, just not able to do really any of the boxes that you needed to check going into this game, Wes. You weren't able to accomplish them. You didn't win the turnover margin. We talked about limiting tackles for loss, sacks for Oklahoma. We talked about limiting negative plays. You weren't able to do that. You gave up 5-6 sacks in the game. Gave up what was the tackles for loss number? I think like 13 or something. A lot of negative plays. And you weren't able to create explosive plays. You had the phase on a fourth down. You got a 36-yard run. That's really all you got on the ground. 54 yards, I think, for Faison. 36 of them came on that single carry. You did have a downfield throw where, if the ball's thrown out a little bit more, maybe it's a touchdown. Instead, you get a PI, so you're not creating a lot of chunk explosive plays. And then defensively for South Carolina, nothing to write home about either, right? This is an Oklahoma team that we talked about had some struggles up front, not to the extent of last year. But, hey, can South Carolina stop them from running the football, get into some third down situations where you can try to wreak some havoc up front? Well, another perfect storm in a bad way there because, Oklahoma was able to run the football. I remember I told you after the game, Wes, or during the game, man, it seems like Oklahoma's getting about 6 yards a carry. Not sure if that number was accurate, but you go back and look after the game, their two running backs both averaged 5.3 yards a carry. So they're ahead of the sticks constantly. You don't have Dylan Stewart for most of the game, so that affects your pass rush. And quite frankly, I think Oklahoma did a really good job of scheming up when they needed something on second down, on third down. They're able to just run some quick, hitch routes and things like that, stuff over the middle. Easy pitch and catch, to be honest with you, offensively. Whereas South Carolina, everything that they were trying to do offensively just looked really difficult because it was. And I know we'll get into this a little bit more. Some of the things, I think this was the greatest example of some of the things offensively you're going back and looking at it saying, I don't quite get what's going on here. In a lot of the other games so far this season, Wes, offensively for South Carolina, you're able to go back and say, all right, there was some good here. Missouri game, terrible rushing performance, way too many negative plays, way too many penalties. You're able to pass the ball. Kentucky game, cut down on the penalties, found some things in the running game here and there. LSU game, couldn't pass the ball consistently, but a really nice rushing performance. In this one, there wasn't really anything that you could point to outside of a few plays here and there where South Carolina was able to consistently get something going in the run game, in the pass game, protecting the quarterback. Yeah, they were better at penalties, right? They weren't penalized as much. They didn't have the procedural stuff, but they still got behind the sticks way too much, couldn't run the football. And then I think we're having the biggest conversation yet about what they're actually doing offensively after this game.
Yeah, and so the weird thing was, man, they actually early in the game got themselves in some shorter yardage situations. They weren't now as the game went on, Oklahoma pins their ears back, kind of later second half. I mean, they're just teeing off on the Norris at that point. But early on, they got themselves in some third and makeable situations, some fourth and shorts and stuff like that too. But, they just weren't really able to convert those third downs, obviously. And that was kind of what you wanted. Like the typically, if you're bad on third down, you can go back and be like, well, you were averaging 3rd and 10, so you're going to be bad. This one, at least the beginning, that was not really the case. And I think it's a good point on Oklahoma, man. Their offense really kind of attacked the short perimeter parts of the field. They were very good at just like little stick routes, little out routes where you're just saying, hey, settle in. In South Carolina, here's the thing. They talk, they do play a lot of man coverage, but they also play a lot of quarters coverage where it morphs into man as the routes develop down the field. But right off the bat, there is room underneath. If you're playing kind of like a cover 4 type zone that matches up into man. And so I thought that Oklahoma did a fantastic job. They ran the ball well enough to where they were comfortable. Hey, we can just attack these easy throws underneath. Oklahoma throws so much at you defensively, getting back to the South Carolina offense. I understand you don't always know what look they're going to be in, but there were times, man, like I'll give you an example. I sent you a screenshot of a play. And again, you can cherry pick on any game ever and be like, that was a bad call, right?
Sure.
I feel like we on this show and on Gamecock Central, we have been incredibly fair with the small sample size to start the year and saying, hey, guys, it's 2 games, it's 3 games. And even Beamer has said, he said it, I guess, maybe a week ago.
Yep.
Hey, the results have been alarming in terms of offensive stats. 2 or 3 games, small sample size. We're not at a small sample size anymore, right? But there were times, and so here's the thing. I'm getting very long-winded already, Chris. Here's the thing. The game plan, I think we could see from the very beginning, was let's try to get them moving side to side. The Nick Harbor jet sweep, kind of little chest pass, pop pass, whatever you want to call it, jet sweep to start the game. You're trying to get them moving side to side. You're going to throw quick balls to the perimeter if they give it to you. And you're trying to use that horizontal motion to hit the inside zone back downhill with your running backs and get something going the way you did last week against LSU. So keep their linebackers at bay with the horizontal stuff. They motion Jaden Sellers into the backfield at times. Let's try to get him out on the perimeter. Let's run some read stuff off of that. Then let's swing the ball out off of that. But I thought at times, so here's my problem. At times it just seems too hard. Like it just seems like you watch, not that Ole Miss beat Georgia, but you watch that game. There's times where Kiffin is literally like yelling at the quarterback, like pre-snap. We know that this is off coverage on a single side of the field. They have a formation into the boundary. It's one-on-one over here. The opponent's in zone coverage. and the corner is 10 yards off, and he's going, just throw the quick hitch. Like, they're going to give us 5 yards. Let's take it. And in the play I'm talking about, they throw the hitch. DB comes screaming up, trying to make a tackle. He misses, and then now that comes down to players, right? Player makes a play. But, I'm sitting there going, they're maybe they're disguising, right? But that DB is so far off, even if he is disguising, you're going to have just spit the ball out there. Like there were too many times that I feel like, especially watching it in the context of Oklahoma saying, hey, flip the ball out there, attacking the slot, like the slot spot basically. And, South Carolina did do a little bit of that, and it was kind of successful when they did. So you're going, could you not have done that a little bit more? There is a play on a 3rd and short where, and it's kind of gone a little bit viral. I think they even talked about it on the broadcast. Carolina has multiple routes going down the field, and you're going, where's the shorter routes on a 3rd and 2, right? Now, I think if you have a nuanced conversation in their defense, I'm pretty sure. So Matt Fuller is in the game at running back. He chips one of the pass rushers, helps out in pass pro, and then is supposed to run a route after that. However, the rush gets there so quickly, and he helps chipping, but he gets kind of knocked off kilter, so he can't get out into the route anyway. So if you look at it, you're going, why in the, is there not why is there not at least a safety valve on this play, right? By design, there actually probably was. However, even if we acknowledge that, Chris, it's 3rd and 2. This is not an offense that's been able to protect the passer. The defense appears to be a look where they're actually weirdly giving you the underneath. It just doesn't feel like there's a ton of just it's not a ton of plays right now where you're going, man, that was like a great call. Like the offense out-schemed them that time. You can say whatever you want about Dow. There were some down moments. There were some up moments. There was also about one time per game where I said, dang, Dow got him on that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Like there were, and I can still specifically see, like, there's a couple calls against Kentucky last year where you're going, that was beautiful. The 4th down call against Alabama, the shovel pass against Missouri. And that's just a few that just pop off in my head. I'm sure there were many more. And again, to be completely fair, I'm sure there's probably 10 calls a game where they had the perfect call on and the protection gets blown up and it just doesn't hit. I completely understand that. Trying to be completely fair. But at the same time, it just has not hit enough to where we are at a big enough sample size that you're going, something's got to give.
Well, and to add, again, to add to the nuance, and look, let me be clear, neither of us are sitting here saying, because we're sitting here talking about the play calling and a lot of the things that didn't make sense. Are there limitations up front, to put it kindly? Oh, absolutely. I mean, 3 guys missed this game, Wes, who have been either full-time starters or have been a starter at some point going in. So that's 3 guys. You lose 3 others during the game. So you're really down 6 guys. Okay. Right? Like, that is part of it. Another part of it is exactly what you just laid out from a play calling standpoint. I also think if you're sitting there going, why isn't Sellers throwing it away in some instances? Or why is he not seeing the check down? I think we've said this, and I think it was evident in this game. The pressure is getting to him. And I don't mean mental pressure. I mean literally the physical pressure that is on him so often during the game. I mean, a majority of the time against LSU, a majority of the time, I haven't gone back and looked at the West. Do you know the number off the top of your head? Like how many dropbacks he's pressured on? I would imagine it's a majority of the time. It sure seemed like it. So why is he not seeing the field as well? I think, frankly, he's been under pressure a lot. And I think even when he isn't actually under pressure, you can imagine as a quarterback, you're sitting there going, how long do I actually have here? Right. And I think Shane Beamer touched on it last night during his teleconference. He was asked, what can you do, to eliminate some of that pressure and get the ball out? And he's like, I mean, aside from getting it out in a half second, what can you do? Now, schematically, there's some adjustments that you can make. That's what you've got to try to find. Yeah, you need to get healthier, but you have to find something offensively. And I think that leads to another point, Wes. Let's talk about Lenore Sellers' usage. Once again, I'm leaving this game going, I don't feel like Lenore Sellers is being maximized. You do have to walk that line between, hey, we're going to run Lenore Sellers on design runs 15 times. Maybe schematically, whether it's a zone read concept or going into the game, seeing what Oklahoma's doing, how they're lining up defensively, maybe the offensive staff is looking at it going, we don't really have a play on here. But to your point about last year, there were times when South Carolina would line up and say, we're going to run power 4 times in a row. See if you can stop it. You didn't really see that here. Went back again, just using as a guide because it's imperfect, PFF. I mean, they've got Sellers at 5 scrambles, 1 zone run, which again, those can be reads, and 1 gap scheme run. Why are those numbers not higher? Why, when you're in the red zone, and we know Oklahoma's they've given up some scores in the red zone, but only going into this game had given up 9 red zone trips. South Carolina's down there a couple times. They get 1 touchdown, and very fortunate to get that touchdown. It came on a 3rd down where Sellers had to scramble around and kind of make something happen. Why has he not got the ball in his hands more? He's maybe the most dynamic open field quarterback in the country. He's maybe the most powerful runner as a quarterback in the country. One of the most powerful runners just in general, I think, in the country. South Carolina's on the 2-foot line. He doesn't have the ball in his hands. You're giving it there. Shane Beamer was asked on Sunday night, do you guys, where's the quarterback sneak? We practice it. Okay, well, where is it? And we have the benefit, of course, of hindsight. But given what we did see in that sequence, why does he not have the ball in his hands? Now, they did score on that one when they're eventually on the 4th down. I just feel like down there, Wes, when the field's condensed, you got to let 16 be 16 a little bit more in that instance and kind of take your chances, especially with how we saw the run game go throughout that game. Yeah, you had a little bit of success at times, but generally you didn't have a lot of success. Field's getting condensed against a defense like that that's super aggressive. We saw their aggressiveness paid off in a lot of instances. I just thought not only in those situations, but throughout the game, you got to lean on 16 more in the run game. That's how I saw it.
Yeah, and I think teams are probably a lot of times when you're reading guys, they're saying make Sellers give. But I think there are things you can do to be more stubborn about getting him involved. And you can change, and I'm sure they do to an extent, but you can mess around with who you're reading. Like if they're going like traditional zone read and you just leave the backside defensive end unblocked and you say read him, Oklahoma's going to say take Sellers every time, make them give it, right? That's what they're going to do. But I think there were a couple times maybe where Sellers should have kept and didn't, honestly. And but I think like if you look at like the entire sequence, once you got down there towards the goal line, you're at the 9 to start the game, 1st and goal from the 9, which is one of the last places you want to be if you're goal to go, because you have the full 9 yards, but you're still dealing with a compressed field. And they get a decent run, I think 2 or 3 yards on 1st down, get it down to about the 6. And I I did not love. I know you're saying, hey, we're going 4 downs. I didn't really love the entire sequence there in the first place, in just terms of run. And on the one that got completely blown up on 3rd down, they're trying to run like split zone. H-backs coming across, and it was either miscommunication, a missed assignment, or a missed read, because the free defender should never just have a free shot at your running back on that play. So a lot of times on that split zone, you'll kind of see the H-back come across, and basically you'll see guys sometimes just tag off the rusher just to slow him up a little bit, the free runner. But you're not blocking him. You want him to keep flying in there. And then what do? You pull it, and then the H-back is now out on the edge, blocking for you out front. And so I don't know. Now, sometimes when that guy's coming across on split zone, look, it's, hey, the first guy to you, you should block him. So we may never know what the actual design, like how that was supposed to be repped. I don't know if I'd love an offensive coordinator to tell me, like, if we have anybody on here, like, what's in general, what were the rules for each guy on that? But I know the rule was not to have a free runner, not block him, and then hand off into that rush. You know what I'm saying? And, so there were some execution issues, obviously, down there as well. I also, man, I understand completely. I'm all for aggressiveness on 4th down. I'm all for making a statement. And I think Beamer and the guys got in their head, like, we're going to go score a touchdown on this first drive. And we're going to do everything in our power to do it. And if we don't score a touchdown, so be it. But we feel like we need to make a statement. And if you don't get it, Oklahoma's backed up into your own student section. It is not lost on me the advantages of, even if you don't get it, you have major field position advantages there versus kicking the easy field goal and then letting them start over at the 25. I get all those things. However, I think in a game when you knew that the points are going to be at a premium, once you got knocked backwards on the 3rd down and it was going to be 4th and 5 or 6, you typically, unless you have to have a touchdown late in the game, you just do not see teams go for it on 4th down and goal from the 5. Like that's not really a high percentage play. I feel like high percentage scenario, I should say, converting that. So, in a perfect world, you talked about complementary football. Even if you don't get it, defense backed up, they force a 3 and out, you get the ball back in great field position. That's why teams go for it, is because they don't reset the field position, even if you don't get it. In that particular situation, easy to say now, but I did not really love it. I think 7-3 right there, keep a little momentum. Not that it changes the game, honestly, based on what we saw after that, but who knows? And I think that's the frustrating part for fans, man. It just never, like, it felt like South Carolina for the first, like, 15 minutes of the game, you're going a stretch towards the end of the second quarter into halftime. You're saying, well, they're getting back in this game. You miss the opportunity to kick a field goal at the end of the half. You get the ball to start the second half, and then you go 3 and out and come up inches short, of the first down on 3rd down.
Yeah, that was the missed opportunity. And a lot of people talk about, the middle 8, and you don't necessarily have to win that West, but in this game's context, it was important, right? You got a decent return. Was Oklahoma laying on Brady Hunt instead of just bodies piled up? Whatever. Water under the bridge at this point. But you do miss that opportunity to go try to get some points. And then, we typically have seen, it seems like South Carolina does like to get the ball in the second half to begin the second half. And they had that opportunity. And so you're sitting there going, I even remarked to the person I was watching the game with, like, you have not played well in this first half, but you're still in the game and you have an opportunity where you're going to get the ball back. Can you find something offensively? They didn't. Then what happens, what I talked about earlier, you do get off the field eventually, but you don't get an interception. You get a pass breakup. Oklahoma's in field goal range. They've got a good kicker. They nail a 54-yarder. Now you're down 2 scores. And then with what you've seen on offense, you don't really have, you're still in the game, right? A 10-point deficit is not totally insurmountable, but you're sitting there going, all right, with what we've seen offensively for South Carolina, and even with some of the things you had seen with Oklahoma's offense against the Carolina defense, that seemed like a pretty big turning point in the game, that you weren't able to come out and immediately get some points and then you give up another score. And then from there, we saw the rest of it. Oklahoma just was able to really, really bear down on South Carolina in the second half and obviously kept them completely out of the end zone, tacked on some more points themselves, and that was that.
No doubt. All right, we're going to continue this conversation here in a moment, but first, let me tell you about a couple of our great sponsors here on GC Live. First, our friends at Game Time. Head on over to gametime.co or get the Game Time app. I know you can't see me, but I'm looking at it right now. And whether it is concerts, whether it is sporting events, whether it is other events, our friends at Game Time have got you covered. One of my favorite things about Game Time is that you essentially are going to know exactly what you're paying right when you're looking at the tickets on that initial screen. If you turn on all-in pricing, you're not going to get to the very end and they're going to tell you, hey, it costs way, way, way more than you thought. So mentally, you can go ahead and prepare yourself. Hey, this is what I'm paying. This is what I'm looking to pay. And you're going to have this little spot right there on the screen where you can see exactly what the field would look like from the seat that you are in the process of buying from our friends at Game Time. And also, one of the best parts about it, too, is you got this Game Time guarantee where if you find a ticket for cheaper for the same game in the same section later on, they're going to refund you 110% of the price. So that awesome Game Time guarantee. If you've never used Game Time before, download the app today or go to gametime.co. Use the code ON3, that's ON3. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase, though terms do apply. Shout out to our friends at Game Time.
All right, we're also going to tell you about our friends over at Palmetto Golf and Belts. It's palmettogolfing.com. Go check it out. Brandon Cohn, longtime Gamecock Central member, big South Carolina fan. Another guy, Wes, this is a theme, commiseration with Brandon. We do it often, but he does have the awesome store over at palmettogolfing.com. That's Palmetto Golf and Belts. If you're a golfer, custom golf towels, tees, and gloves, all extremely well made, and a local company. That's what you can feel good about. Great stuff. If you're not a golfer, you can always find something for that golfer in your life. Already October 20th, Wes, so Christmas right around the corner. Whether you're looking for a Christmas gift, a birthday gift for that golfer in your life, check out his amazing products over there. Another thing we love, the needlepoint belts, available in the cross design, South Carolina palmetto tree and moon design. He's got the blue. He's got the South Carolina garnet. Go check him out, palmettogolfing.com, Palmetto Golf and Belts. If you're on Gamecock Central like you should be, you've seen him on there all the time, always running some awesome specials in his new online storefront, newly redesigned, palmettogolfing.com. Support local businesses that support us. Go check out their great products, custom golf towels, belts, gloves, and tees at palmettogolfing.com.
Man, you talked about sellers earlier, and I'm with you, man. I think a little bit more meat on the bone there in terms of that discussion. I have been very, very hesitant to be too critical of his play this year just because of kind of the situation he's been in, man. Now, I do think it is fair to say there are some situations on the field in terms of just situational football when he is outside the pocket. And somebody made a good point in the chat earlier today. Last week, he's called for 2 penalties for intentional grounding. Then this week, while completely outside of the pocket, which would have been completely fine just to flip the ball over to the sideline. He, on at least, I'm trying to think, at least 2 occasions I can remember off the top of my head, took losses instead of just flipping the ball out of bounds and living to fight another down. Well, with this offense, we've already talked about the negative plays. We've already talked about how just debilitating they are for an offense that's struggling already. When you have that opportunity to throw the ball away and then you don't do so, that's really, really tough on the offense. The fourth down play where he stepped out of bounds. I had no faith in the officials whatsoever that they were going to overturn that, which was the drive where you scored your only touchdown of the game. So that thing came down to inches. I just feel like, I don't know, man. As of right now, I feel like there's so much that has happened around this kid that he is not playing free. He's not playing like himself. He's not playing like his natural game, I feel like. And there are certain things that you want to, as you develop as a quarterback, and I know he has very high NFL aspirations. If you want to develop as a quarterback, there are certain things you have to do within structure, right? A lot of that within the passing game is within structure. Making your reads, going through your progressions, resetting your feet, getting your balance, stuff like that. And I don't know, man. Like I still put very little blame, frankly, on him, but I do think he just does not look comfortable in this offense, does not look confident right now, and doesn't. And I'm not saying he's not confident in himself. I think he is. I feel like he hides it pretty well, but I gotta imagine he's frustrated. And he had high hopes for this season. He had high hopes for himself, for this offense, for everything around it. And for whatever reason, it just has not come together. But some of those plays to me were just an example of him not just completely being himself right now and feeling comfortable going out there and just what is it? Our guy Ramon Robinson says, let 16 be 16. And it just doesn't feel like that right now.
It doesn't. And I think, look, there are some instances where, you do have to put it on the quarterback, right? I mean, and that's for anybody. I mean, some of the guys, even some of the guys who are playing at elite levels as quarterbacks this year, they'll have plays within the structure of a game where you go, what are you doing? And it's on the quarterback. And that's been the case with Sellers. But I do think if you're trying to find the root cause, Wes, I mean, I do think you have to point to, the immense amount of pressure that he's been under, the lack of a consistent running game, the lack of offensive consistency in general. Some of that, yes, he's had a huge hand in. Throw the ball away, whether it's out of the pocket, throw the ball away, whether when you're in the pocket, don't take an intentional grounding. Like there are some things that you have to do yourself within that structure. Hey, if there's a guy open, see him, throw the football, or get out of there if you don't see something immediately and you have a chance to escape. But I do think if you're looking at overall the root cause, Shane Beamer said it. He said it many times. He said it Saturday and Sunday after the game. Like they're not maximizing this offense. And really, when you look at that, they're also not maximizing Lenoir Sellers. And I think part of that is not being able to adequately help him with what you're calling, whether it's in the run game or the pass game, getting him more involved. And I think, look, the pressure, we've talked about it all season. That's a real thing that affects quarterbacks when you have actual pressure. When you've been pressured so consistently that even when it's not there, you're kind of rushing things. It's affecting your decision making. I think we've seen that all year. And, I actually don't. I feel like the term regressed is like overused. It's one of those I almost want to retire in sports vernacular. But certainly when you look at it is real, how he was playing down the stretch last year versus how he's playing this year. It's not the same. It's not that progression that we hope to see from Lenoir Sellers. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it, which we, have been spending all of our time this season laying out.
Yeah, and I will say this, man. Like, there's been a couple of comments. Oh, he was not that talented in the first place. Like, let's be honest, y'all. That was not a 1 game sample size of him just wrecking shop last year. Like that was, and even before he got hurt, it really wasn't even just half of the season. Before he got hurt last year, look at what he was about to do to LSU. Like, look what he did to those guys in a half last season. Look at what you still had the issues with some turnovers early on. Look what he did at Alabama last season. And then we saw it now really come together, in the final 6 games. He got, I don't want to say blasted, but a lot of people had words about the performance against Illinois. And I was going, if this is a down performance, that's still pretty good for a lot of quarterbacks in college football right now. And so this was not just some small sample size last year where he went off for a game or two and it was fool's gold. Like this guy has been talked about as a top 15, top 10, top 5 pick for a reason. Like there's no lack of ability with Lenora Sellers. Like the ability is 100% there. It just has to be unlocked. And, so far there's a big enough sample size. Like to this point, it just really has not happened this season. Like South Carolina needed it to, like they wanted it to. And I'm sure like Lenoris and, his friends and family wanted it to as well. Let's go big picture a little bit, man. I know you put out, so Beamer had an answer yesterday I thought was quite interesting. You put out some stuff this morning. That's on Gamecock Central. Obviously, we won't give it all away. That's for our subscribers in terms of just where things are. But I thought, in my opinion, some people will disagree. I get it. I actually thought this was a pretty strong answer from Shane Beamer last night. Not even more so specifically about the VT rumors and the VT job, but just where his mindset is. There is coach speak. There is coaches responding to other jobs where you're going, well, they're just saying what they have to say, right? I think that I kind of just got a real feel for exactly where his head is at right now in terms of what he talked about his plans are for the program moving forward in a general sense. But anyway, so he was asked about it. I'm just going to read the whole quote. He said, I have conveyed publicly many times how much I want to be here, and I respect the question. I understand you asking, and I'm not mad. I've conveyed many times how much I want to be here. This is my dream job. I said that when I came here. Nothing has changed. This is the part that I thought was interesting. I am pissed off at the way we're performing right now, and it's not acceptable. I came here to win a championship, and right now we're not getting it done, and my focus right now is on getting it fixed and getting it back to last year. We were 2 points away from being in the college football playoff, and I'm working my rear end off to get us back to where we're in the mix or in that mix and playoff talk. And that's the same thing I told our football team today. And I guess the gist of that article was that would be a parachute or something for me to get out of here and have a soft landing spot. Well, I'm not happy with where we are right now, and I'm determined to get it fixed. We are in a storm right now that I'm going to get us out of. Thoughts?
Yeah, look, I've told you this, several times, Wes, when this stuff started circulating. I don't see it. And when I say I don't see it, I don't see or buy the notion that Shane Beamer is wanting to take the Virginia Tech job over South Carolina. There's actually a lot of evidence that that's never been the case, just weighing the two jobs against each other. That's number one. The counter that some have had to that is, well, okay, I get that, Chris, but what about if he's in trouble at South Carolina and sees it as exactly what he said there in the quote, a soft landing, a parachute? Doesn't seem that interested in that either publicly. And I think what I've heard behind the scenes, Wes, matches up with that. I don't have any doubts that some folks over at Virginia Tech involved in that process are interested in Shane Beamer. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. But this is Beamer's dream job. He said that publicly many times. I think that's not just a throwaway press conference line. Beamer is a guy who, as we all know, wears his emotions on his sleeve, says things, And I don't think that's just some throwaway line where you've got a random coach saying, this is where I want to be, or deflecting. He didn't really shy away from it. But I think you also look at, if your question is, okay, well, what if Shane Beamer's actually in some trouble at Carolina and he does see it as a parachute? I don't think he's looking at it that way. He's on the first year of a 6-year deal at South Carolina. The first year being this year, 2025. He just signed an extension, got an extension after the 9-win season last year that was signed in January of this year. And this is where he wants to be, and he's well paid. And frankly, everything I've heard, Wes, indicates that he's going to have the opportunity, and that South Carolina's administration views this as he's earned the opportunity to fix it and turn it around. Now, I know some people are saying, why is he not making more in-season changes? That's a fair point. Whenever it happens, whether it's next week, whether it's game 11, whether it's after the season, I do think that where it's tracking is that there'll be some changes and some differences. But I also think it's very much tracking towards Shane Beamer's going to get an opportunity to turn this thing around. It was just last season that they had 9 wins, that they were on the verge of a playoff. This season has not gone well. It's not how anybody's envisioned it going. But that doesn't mean that South Carolina is looking at it as a Penn State situation, right? I think that's what's been in some people's minds. Hey, will South Carolina make the Penn State move? Does Shane Beamer look at it as, okay, I'm in a James Franklin type situation? And I just think that those two situations aren't the same. There's actually some key differences in them. And those situations in reality, not just if we're looking at it, in reality, they're not the same either. Now, you can disagree with that or say South Carolina should do this or that, or Shane Beamer should do this or that. But I just think, based on what I've heard, I think that's actually the case.
Yeah, and I get people. There's a few responses in the chat. It's coach speak. I get it. You can say that. Maybe it will be. Who knows? But I don't think he had to go into the detail that he did in the response. Never say never, but
yeah, you can't ever say never. I mean, in 2025 in college football, you never say never. I mean, Will Muschamp went into the 2020 season safe. And it was really, and he shouldn't have been safe. I'm just telling you, it was conveyed behind the scenes. This is a COVID year. Things are jacked up in the sport. You're safe. And he was safe until he wasn't safe, So you always have to keep that in mind. Something could always change. The best we can do is say, where are things right now? And I had someone on the Insiders Forum this morning say, what are the differences between Muschamp and Spurrier? It's kind of different. Or Muschamp and Spurrier, Muschamp and Beamer. There are a lot of differences. Shane Beamer has more ranked wins so far. He's got 2 wins against Clemson in 4 tries. I realize that Clemson was absolutely rolling in the Shane Beamer in the Will Muschamp era. I get that. But he still does have those 2 wins. And Will Muschamp's previous full season before he got dismissed was a 4-win year, where Shane Beamer's was a 9-win year where they almost made the playoff. So, and he's in the first year again of a 6-year deal. So there are some differences. And if you want changes, look, I totally get that, because this year has been rough. There's no doubt. And I think Shane Beamer recognizes that. But what I'm saying is, as of now, all indications are he's going to get an opportunity to figure the thing out, or to try to figure the thing out, and to try to fix it. So we'll see where that goes from here.
Yeah, and I think maybe not the case for some fans, but I think it sounds like with the administration, you do buy yourself a little bit of goodwill with that 9-win season, with being in. You showed the blueprint. You showed, literally, not that anybody's raising banners over being a couple plays short of the playoff, but you showed you were right there. I think some people have forgotten, I feel like, that. You can go ahead and put a check mark for this season by underachieved, but they've overachieved in 3 of the 5 years. So the fact nobody even thought they were going to go to a bowl game in year 1, and they overachieved. You have had some I think the difference too. You have had some really special moments in the Beamer era in terms of massive wins. Clemson has fallen off, but when South Carolina went in there and won that game in Clemson, at that point, Clemson had won 40-something straight home games. I'm pretty sure the number was. And in a lot of ways, that almost kind of just, I feel like proved Clemson was not invincible at home, and we've seen them struggle since then. So I do think you have to have, not that you have to be happy with the game on Saturday, not that you have to be happy with this season at all. There were high expectations. They're not being met. I mean, I was a part of those high expectations. I had high expectations for the season. Hasn't been what I thought it would be. Last season, Chris, every single what if we could have put on that season prior to the year starting was answered into the positive.
Yep.
Just about every single what if, not all of them, because kicking situation, special teams, all the turnover there, it has been pretty good. The defensive tackles, which was one of the biggest question marks on paper, those guys have performed pretty well, man. But almost all the what ifs went positive last year. Everybody has questions coming into a season, and everybody has a ton of roster turnover. So you can go up, down, up, down. It is hard to win right now. Again, that is not an excuse, but I think the administration probably sees a little bit more of a big picture. 9 wins last year. He's earned the right. And also, I feel like the offense, a lot of people are grouping last year's offense in with this year's. The offense last year was not as bad as some people are letting on. It was middle of the pack in the SEC. It was actually top 2 in the SEC in points scored in SEC games. It was number 2 in the conference. There's a lot of good last year. So I think, yes, I get it. If you're a fan, Saturday sucked, and you cannot be happy with that. I get it 100%. I also think, Chris, it is worth acknowledging just because there is not a coaching change right now in terms of staff, just because Beamer hasn't said, oh, we fired our O-line coach last week, we're going to fire our OC this week. Just because he does not feel the need to make a change right now does not mean that there will not be changes in the offseason, because those are two different things. And I know a lot of people earlier this year were going, well, hey, give Sean Elliott play calling. You can't make Sean Elliott tight ends coach, kind of, O-line coach, play caller, quarterback. Like, you can't just give it all to one. You know what I'm saying? Like, not that would be the case if you made him the play caller. You would have to split up even more of those duties. And I can just imagine. So for one, if Beamer is going to make a change at OC at the end of the season, he is not going to tell you that now. It's not going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to do that at the end of the year, but not now. And just because he hasn't done it yet doesn't mean he's not going to heavily grade the offense and decide what to do moving forward. Because I think those comments a week ago talking about the offensive numbers being alarming, to me, were the most candid public comments I've actually maybe ever heard him make about the status of one of his coaches' particular units.
Yeah, and it was pretty clear, which I do think, again, like the play calling, like fair game, obviously. But I think we could all agree, us fans and frankly Beamer, because the action is there to back up the notion, thought that, hey, out of all the issues we've got from an offensive standpoint, what's the biggest one? And he thought it was the offensive line. And frankly, it still is. Like, the other things are also problems. Play calling. We just spent a good bit of time earlier, Wes, talking about the play calling, especially in the most recent game against Oklahoma. That is certainly fair game. But he made that change. Now, there are certain things that you're not going to turn around. You're not going to fix fully in the course of the season. And if your argument is, well, change Shula, let somebody else make a run of it, see how much better you can get and do it right now, like, understand that. That's fair game too. And I think there's, if that's your argument, like, that's a fair, maybe even a good argument, but it's not going to fix the things that you need fixed for the rest of this season in full. And it's not going to fix it all the way going forward either. Like, one of the things you mentioned last year, Wes, kind of everything, all the questions hitting. One of those items was nailing the transfer portal. I mean, South Carolina did a great job last offseason in the portal with their acquisitions. They had Rocket Sanders. They had, a second-year guy in Josh Simon, but they had Josh Simon. They had the linebackers, right, that we saw them bring in, Demetrius Knight being chief among them. We saw, veterans at other spots. We saw the offensive line. You got 2 offensive line starters out of the portal where, there are a lot of offensive line problems last year too. But one of those guys, Simpkins, is still in the NFL. You found 2 starters there. This year, I think if you look at the whole of the transfer portal, didn't hit on as many guys, particularly on the offensive line, right? And that's something that we've seen throughout the course of the year. So you have a lot more to fix in the short and long term than just the OC. Now, do you still need to address that? Yeah, you got to get that figured out this season too. So again, I think we do have to dismiss the notion of, like, I understand if you're saying Shane Beamer's not making the change in the timeline that I think he should, or it's obvious that he should make a change. I get that. But we can't say he won't make changes. I've still seen a little bit of that. Beamer won't make changes. He's had 1 losing season so far. This one is certainly tracking to be that way. But he's had 1 losing season in Columbia, made some staff changes then. May not have been the ones you wanted, but he made changes. And then he made his first midseason change this year in another difficult year. The point, I was really long-winded. The point I'm making is, if this is a 4-8, 5-7 season, for a lot of reasons, I would be shocked if you go into 2026 without more changes in the offseason. I think we'll see that. And so you got to give it time. May not be on the timeline that fans want, which I get totally. I get the frustration. But that doesn't mean they won't eventually be made. And we'll have to see where that goes.
Yeah, I just don't know if Shane Beamer, Chris, sees much upside to making that change midseason and be like, hey, we're going to bring in another voice, another play caller. We're going to try to do even more different things. And then at the end of the season, we'll go out, we'll bring in another OC. He'll bring in a new voice. He'll have a different approach. And now, your offensive guys already had a different OC last year than this year. So you'd have an OC in 2024, a different in 2025, a second one in 2025, and now a different one in 2026. So you're talking about 4 different voices in 2 years. Like, I don't know if he sees the upside of that, and he's probably going short term. Again, I'm not saying long term. I'm not saying I don't think he is tied to Shula. Like, I don't think he's going to get to the end of the year and just say, I have to stick with him. Short term, he's probably looking at 2022. The end of, after the Florida game that year, there were people who say, oh, well, that's not going to happen this time. And that's fair. Maybe that happens once in a lifetime. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there were 0 signs in that Florida game in 2022 that the offense was going to come out and do what they did against Tennessee and do what they did against Clemson. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm telling you, Beamer's weighing the upside and the downside of blowing it up in the middle of the year versus just waiting and evaluating everything at the end. The defense in 2023, everybody was ready to get rid of Clayton. Beamer not only decided to stick with him short term, make some changes, make some schematic changes, make some personnel changes into the offseason, we feel like it can be fixed. And last year, South Carolina has one of the best defenses in school history, or at least in modern, like recent history. And so, but Chris, even short term, the end of that year, we saw them tweak, make changes. Was that 2023 defense by the end of the year a great lockdown, right home about it defense? Of course not. Were there major improvements compared to what it was earlier in the year when they were just getting completely dominated? Yes, there were. So I think you really have to separate the upside and the downside of a move now, but do not conflate that with that means he is tied to everything you're doing right now on offense long term into the offseason.
Yeah, because and to go back to the point from earlier about Beamer's own job security, like again, let me give the caveat, it's a never say never, but even with a losing season this year, I was asked point, but hey, do you see Beamer being the coach here in 2026? Yes, I think it would take a stunning reversal with how things are being viewed behind the scenes, not by me, not my opinion, right? Just factually, it would take a stunning reversal. But Wes, 2026, if you don't get it fixed, you've got probably a hot seat problem, or more likely than this year if you have another losing campaign in 2026. So there will be some pressure to get it fixed. Shane Beamer's on record. He's gotten stronger and stronger with even his public comments. He said, I'm pissed off, right? He said things more strongly than he typically does because he's typically not a throw my coaches under the bus type of guy. And so we do have to leave. Look, I get, again, I feel like I'm broken record. I get it that you think if you're someone out there that says it needs to be done right now, totally get it. Maybe it does. But that doesn't mean, if you get to the Clemson game and it's over, win or loss, and you have your full body of work from this season, that doesn't mean just because Shane Beamer hasn't done it before the Clemson game or right after the Sunday after the Clemson game, doesn't mean that he's not going to make changes sometime this offseason. Again, I anticipate that if this season continues tracking the way it is, that you're going to see some different things going into next year.
For sure. All right, y'all, we are out of time. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. I know wasn't a whole lot of fun things to talk about, so I get it. But thank you for sticking out with us here on GC Live. We'll have continued coverage throughout the week on, of course, South Carolina, recapping the Oklahoma game and breaking that down, looking ahead to Alabama, and then, of course, starting to look ahead a little bit to what the offseason may look like for the Gamecocks. Of course, coverage of other sports going on as well right now on Gamecock Central. He is Chris. I am Wes. Again, thank y'all for joining us, and we'll see you all very, very soon.